This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 64.
Every year, I am always looking to be that better teacher. And I feel like teachers like myself and Kyle Bragg and Daniel Hill and LaDonda Porter, these are just people's names I'm pulling from the sky. Like these teachers are out on Twitter and out on Facebook and looking for so many more bright ideas and pulling from their colleagues and asking their kids, like, what do you want to learn about? What would you be passionate about learning about?
Welcome to a real world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am running solo today without my fantastic co-host, Mr. Matt Rogers. So today we had an awesome conversation with a physical education teacher from Kentucky. Her name is Candace Young, and I just love the conversation. I loved it from the perspective of an instructional coach. I loved it from the perspective of as a former fifth grade teacher. I also loved it as a parent. She brings to light such great ideas, some simple strategies that we can do to encourage health, encourage mindset, encourage growth, and just great movement in the lives of very, very, very young children that we work with on a daily basis. But regardless of the grade you teach, regardless of the subject that you teach, this interview is going to be fantastic for you to listen to. Candace has such a positive, uplifting, empowering spirit that just comes to life very, very quickly. And I can just tell that the rapport she establishes with students is fantastic. She takes us through what her lessons look like, what her schedule looks like, and how she utilizes that time to make a huge impact on the lives of these young students that she works with every day. We dive deep into her instructional strategies, how they have transcended from kindergarten to eighth and eighth back down to kindergarten, as well as her motivation to just do best for kids. I would highly recommend you give this episode a full listen. If this is your first time joining us, or this is not your first time, please make sure that you have hit the subscribe button on the podcast platform that you're listening to, or on that red button on YouTube if you're watching us right now. I've had the pleasure of having well over 50 conversations with amazing educators that have really helped me grow as a professional. And I selfishly don't want to keep those conversations to myself, hence the podcast. And so, I encourage you to check back in on here on a weekly basis. Every Thursday, we have conversations with just such amazing educators. We've had every subject, we've had every grade level, and we are nearing in on our goal of all 50 states. I would guess that we're well over 35 at this point with our guests. So tune in, share this with other educators, share this with your colleagues and your staff members, because I really do want as many educators to listen to this as possible. Because at Powered Up, if you haven't already, check out our website at Power EDU Up. We're all about empowering education by empowering you. And that's why the URL is slightly different than the name. Powered Up, we're all about getting jazzed up and fired up for the day of teaching. But the website is Power EDU Up because we are looking to power education up as much as possible. So if you haven't already, please subscribe and share this with as many educators as you can. So without any further delay, let's jump into that amazing conversation with Candace Young. Hi, Candace. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are
I'm
you?
doing wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's kick things off by having you officially introduce yourself. Let us know where you're coming from and just give us a snapshot of what your career in education has looked like.
All right. My name is Candace Young, and I am originally from Gravel Switch, Kentucky. That's why I talk so country. But now I currently teach at Madison Kindergarten Academy in Richmond, Kentucky. I have taught in a K through 5 building for about 4 years, and then I moved to almost Cincinnati. It was called Newport, Kentucky, and I taught there, and it was third grade all the way up to eighth grade. And I taught there for a little bit. And then I found this job that said it was kindergarten only all day long. And I wanted to be the reason that they fell in love with movement and that kids, like, got passionate about physical education and physical activity and health and all those good things jumbled up into one at a very, very young age. So, yeah, I'm from Kentucky and I am excited to be here.
That's interesting. That's really interesting because so I have 3 kids, and my oldest is he's going to be 4 in a couple weeks. And I mean, it takes about almost no energy for me to convince my kids to do anything that involves movement, running around, being crazy. So it almost seems like a huge challenge to have that high of an expectation for yourself to make kindergarten the foundation where they're falling in love with movement and with health. Whereas, to compare it to the 3rd through 8th graders that you were working with, I can see the middle schoolers being a challenge because of that, that period of time where you're going through puberty and those developmental changes. And that's where it's super important for health and all those components. But it's almost, they're a little bit older to be able to comprehend the science and the knowledge behind it. So what is it about kindergarten that you feel that you can set that foundation of movement and health and all those other components that you wanted to go for?
Right, and like you said, your kids like to get up and move around, but
Hmm.
that's probably because you're pretty active as well. And lots of the parents, especially through COVID, they gave their kiddos the iPad, and it's like instant, instant, instant success.
Hmm.
And I love to see students fail and then suddenly succeed. And when you see that light bulb go on a 5-year old, it's just a whole different ball game compared to a middle school kid who's had lots and lots of failure and lots of success. Where a 5-year old, the only thing most of them have had in their hands is this iPad where they click start and it starts, versus you got to go outside and get on the monkey bars and you fall off and then you're going to try again. And I teach them to push through things that are hard. And so I just feel like I'm setting that foundation. I want to show them that movement is fun. And I have a lot of overweight 5-year olds this year and the previous year, more than normal. And I just truly feel like COVID was a big part of that, where they're sitting down and stuff. But yeah, for sure, just setting that foundation for the kiddos for sure. So.
Hmm. That's I never would have thought that. And we are an active family, so it's maybe a little bit of being naive with that. What are, for our parents that are potentially listening as well as teachers, what are things that we can do at home to encourage that? Because I do feel as though my kids have been exposed to that feeling of failure. So putting away the technology, that's obviously a huge component. But what are things that we can do inside the house through the cold winter months, as it gets warmer, to encourage movement and motion and health with our younger children?
Well, I would certainly say, like, I love to read. And I have a little, I call him my nephew, but really he is my best friend's kid. And if I'm opening up a book and I'm reading it, he wants to do exactly what I'm doing. And he's 4 years old. Okay. If I have my Nintendo Switch out, he's doing exactly what I'm doing. He wants to play a Nintendo Switch. And so, example is, I put on yoga on the TV, or anything on YouTube, that's kid friendly, and we're moving around. He wants to do that too, and I just see that with our younger kids so much, is that they follow by what we do. Monkey see, monkey do, right? And so I feel like as we just talked about, like, your kiddos are doing what they see you and your family doing, right? And I do not have kids of my own, but like my dog, even if I'm sitting on the couch, the dog's doing what I'm doing, right? He's sitting on the couch. But then if I go outside in the backyard, he wants to be out in the backyard running around. So I just really feel like that as adults, as role models, We need to set those standards and those expectations of get up and moving. And I would just say like getting the kiddos involved in so many different sports. I'm not necessarily a sport minded person, but just getting them out there with other kids and getting them moving, going to the park, going on walks, talking to your kids about moving and the health aspect of it, eating healthy. As a parent, you're putting the food on the table, right? So you're picking what you eat. So if you go through the McDonald's drive-through every day, then that's what your kids are going to eat. So I think it's definitely a lead by example thing, and we got to meet the kiddos where they're at as teachers, and just show them the right way to do things, because sometime at home they're not getting those things. So as teachers, we should show them that we're being active as well. So
Right. What are your conversations like with your kindergartners in terms of, modeling and creating activities that's going to be not to say that that's easy, but that's the easier part to create those activities. But, I just from meeting you and just this, 6 minutes of conversation that we've been into, I feel as though being explicit and being open with the kids is something that you do. So what are some vocabulary words that you use with 5 and 6 year olds? Or we had I don't know if you know him or not, but I saw that you were a shape teacher of the year. I think it's this past year. Kyle Bragg was shape teacher of the year, and we had him on the show, and he said something that stuck with me when it came to kindergartners. He's like, they've only been alive for 60 months. Like, having realistic expectations for kindergartners. So these young kids that you're working with, what are the type of vocabulary words that you're using, or like that conversation that you're using to pair with the activity so that they're learning the importance of health and movement and those components?
well, I would definitely say I use the word health and being physically active a lot. I also use the word enjoyable and challenging, and the enjoyment of being physically active and playing. We love that word. And play is usually one of their sight words. So they love to say, oh, we play, we have free play, we have structured play. And my kiddos know the difference between free play, where we might go outside and play on the playground, and they get to choose what they do. But then Coach Young, I might get to choose their activity as well. So enjoying both and enjoying the challenge. Something that I teach a lot in kindergarten is self awareness, self management, as well as social awareness, and those relationship skills. I teach about that a lot, and decision making. um, I don't necessarily use as much of the fitness knowledge that you would use maybe fifth grade and up. I don't really talk about that as much, but it's really more about health and PE, enjoying challenge. Balance is a big one for their inner ear development for 5 year olds. Being able to balance is so important, um, and just like the just pushing through things that are hard, handling adversity, because that's what it starts out at 5 years old. It starts out at, as soon as they're born, crying to say that they need something. But as they get older, they've got to fight through that adversity, and it's never going to get easier. So we got to teach them that straight up.
Yep. Very interesting. When you were teaching in your school, third grade through eighth grade, obviously very different than kindergartners. We could joke and say the maturity level might have been the same with the eighth graders and the
Yes.
kindergartners. But
Yes, we could.
putting your teacher hat on there, what were things that you learned teaching those grades, structuring lessons, structuring the way you ran your class, that although kindergarten is a very different beast, those teaching skills, those teaching strategies, those foundational things that you do as the instructional leader have clearly carried over from those, upper elementary, middle school classes into your kindergarten classes?
Right. Well, I truly believe that a 5 year old can do anything they put their mind to. And an eighth grader can do anything they put their mind to. Anybody can do anything as long as they're pushing through it and they're working hard. But whenever I taught eighth grade, or whenever I taught the older grades, I basically structure my kindergarten class like I did my eighth grade class. So, for example, I have X's on the floor, and the kids sit on their X's, and I color code them. And so, even at the the higher level grades, I had a certain color that they would use when they would go around to stations, and it just helped me classroom manage very well. But I thought whenever I went into kindergarten, I was like, these kids are not going to remember their X's and where they set and what color basketball they're supposed to grab, or what color scarf they're supposed to grab. But it was so funny that one day I walk in and I'm like, okay, guys, go sit on your X, the kindergartners. And every single one of them knew exactly where to go. Whereas my eighth graders, sometime I would have to have my chart out there to show them where to sit. And so I would say, honestly, like, we joke that the maturity level, like that they're about the same, but that I truly teach from the same foundation, no matter how old they are. I want them to love it. I want them to enjoy it. I want it to be challenging. I want to support them. I want them to be able um, to be self aware and manage their stress. And social emotional learning is key at any level.
Mhm. So I I'm an instructional coach now. I started teaching 5th grade and I transitioned into being an elementary STEM special teacher. And then I now I'm a secondary instructional coach. And what's interesting for me is I'm in the same district. So a lot of the 5th graders that I taught for so long now are in middle school and high school. So when I'm co-teaching with teachers or working in classrooms, I see a lot of the kids that I had maybe 2, 3, up to 7 years ago. And I was just in a class recently and I was talking to kids and they were telling me about something that I used to do this math box thing when I taught math to the whole grade level that I collected regularly to check their work. And they said that they always got stressed about turning it in on time. And I said, oh, yeah, I picked up on that and I probably stopped doing it maybe the year after you left me. And they, were all upset and frustrated. I said, listen, I say this to every kid I've ever had. Anyone that had Mr. Ehrman after you had a better Mr. Ehrman. Like I got better every year. And so the reason I bring this up is you went from the third through eighth to kindergarten, and you talked about how the kindergartners knew right where to go, and maybe that's because your delivery, your management, something was a little bit better than there. So my question or where I'm going with this is if you flipped, you started in kindergarten, then you went to middle school, upper elementary, what do you think you would do different when you were teaching third through eighth? What are things that you've started to do as you've been in the kindergarten academy that have clearly improved your craft as a teacher that you think would definitely have benefited, Coach Young 5, 8 years ago?
Right. So I would say, honestly, and I hate to say this, but this is the honest truth. I didn't have as high of expectations, for my students and their behavior and their love for physical activity. Like example, like some of those middle school kids, they'd rather sit there and text on their phone or something. And I just remember some days I would come home from teaching middle school and I didn't have those high expectations that they should love moving just as much as my fifth graders did. But in my mind, I remember being a middle schooler and I was like, oh, I didn't want to get sweaty and da da da. But I feel like if I could go back, and I mean, I never would get that opportunity, but if I could go back, I would have had higher expectations for my kiddos from the get go and higher expectations for my lessons in the aspects of like sometimes saying our I can statements can get over repetitive and, having to say them like the Danielson model where they want you to say it over and over and over again. Like, I can control my body movements. I can control manipulative, locomotor, non locomotor skills. I can control my body. But I feel like I would tell the kiddos what their job is in that class that day. That's the way I tell 5-year-olds. I'm like, okay, your job today is to be able to control your body. But I never really did that with my older kids. And I wish I could go back to that Coach Young and tell her, hey, you need to set those high expectations for everybody you ever teach. And I feel like I've grown in that for sure.
Hmm. I love that answer because it goes back to what you said about any 5-year-old, any third grader, any eighth grader can accomplish anything that they put their mind to and that they have the time to accomplish. And when the expectations aren't high enough, maybe they are accomplishing what is expected, but it's not to the highest potential that they have. And a phrase an administrator used with my staff that I was a part of, and something that I carried into my classroom was high expectations, high level of support. I'm going to expect the very best from you, but I'm also going to provide you that key support that you have or that you need. So you teach in a kindergarten academy. So I just want to visualize your schedule for a second. How many kindergarten classes do you teach in a day and in a week?
All right. So, well, first and foremost, let me say this. It's called the Kindergarten Academy, and it sounds like it's a private school,
Mm-hmm.
but it is all of the kindergartners in my district, except for I think four schools have like one or two kindergarten groups, whereas they're too far out. Like they're 20 miles this way and
Right.
20 miles this
Right.
way, and it's too far for the parents. At
And
the
and then, sorry
beginning,
to cut you off. Do they then
go ahead.
disperse to like their elementary schools for first through
Yes,
fifth, or
yes. First through fifth,
okay?
and then so there's probably like 10 elementary schools, and then when they get in sixth grade, they will go to three middle schools, and then there's two high schools. So it kind of just keeps getting, you know, more and more specialized as to where they live. But yeah, so my kindergartners, we average about 400 kindergartners, and there's about 20 to 25 in each class. Last year, because of COVID, I taught straight hours of kindergarten. Okay. And anybody that's listening on this right now is probably thinking, oh my goodness, an hour with kindergarten sounds scary. And I mean, at first, I kind of was worried because I was like, the attention span of a 5-year-old is like, whoa, the attention span of a preschooler is about the same way. So, uh, this year we have 30-minute segments, so it's much easier. Like I don't have to flip around and do so many different things, uh, because it's only 30 minutes versus the hour. But I really like the schedule that we have this year. We have 30-minute segments, and I do like 4 segments in the morning, and then I have lunch, and then I do 4 segments in the afternoon, so it's 8 total classes. And then one Tuesday a month I teach preschool to get them ready. We have 2 preschools housed in our kindergarten academy, and they get PE once a month. And we just started that this year. And I was really nervous about teaching preschool. And honestly, I had to go back and say, come on, Coach Young. You know that any kid can do anything they put their mind to as long as you are um, showing them, and like you said, giving them the support they need, because that really does mean a lot. If I'm not giving them my all, and they're not going to give me their all for sure. So I love my schedule though; it's awesome, and I get to teach 5-year-olds all day. It's great.
It takes a special person to do that. Eight classes of 5-year-olds. That is intense, but I can tell you love it, and I can tell you're perfect for it. But my first job was teaching second grade before I went into fifth, and I love second grade. I loved that age. After being in fifth for a while, I always felt like it would be a little bit harder to go back. But you jumped from third through eighth right down to kindergarten without hesitation. So that's amazing. So you talked about the attention span, which I'm sure, whether or not we're parents, we've taught young kids, we've been around young kids, we know that. So how do you structure your class to proactively combat that and be prepared for that attention span piece?
Well, I will just kind of tell you how my class runs.
Sure.
Does that sound
Yeah,
good? Okay,
absolutely.
so they walk in, and I have a password on the door. The password could be a number that they need to know, that their teacher's teaching them. I kind of collaborate with the teachers for sure, or a sight word of the day, or a letter of the day, or a sound of the day. And they have to tell me that as they walk in, and I hug them and greet them and tell them I'm glad that they're there. And a kid knows if you mean it or not, right? And I mean, I truly am glad that they're coming into my gym. So when they walk into my classroom, they sit on their X, and like I said earlier, man, they know that X, and it's their X, and if it's missing because the tape got pulled up off the floor or something, it's the end of the world, but we get it taken care of. And they sit on their X, and I do a little warm up with them, and it's just kind of like jumping jacks and arm circles, and crossing the midline is so important for 5 year olds. Uh, it helps with that inner ear development. You've heard of skipping being scientifically uh, linked to being able to read because they're crossing the midline and both sides of their brain are working. It's the same when they're reading. So I try to do a lot of crossing the midline.
Can I
And as soon,
interrupt you for a second? Can
yeah,
you
absolutely.
so we do have guests that are our listeners that watch on YouTube but also are listening on podcasts. Can you just explain? I am familiar with crossing the midline because I took a class on kinesthetic learning, but can you just,
Okay.
further clarify what you exactly mean by crossing the midline and maybe some traditional movements that anyone would be able to recognize by name that demonstrate that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'll go ahead and go into my stations, and lots of them are crossing the
Okay,
midline.
perfect.
So that'll help. So skipping, when you think of skipping and you're swaying your arms, I do 12 stations. I call it monarch movement because we're the butterflies, we're the monarchs, and so skipping is a big one. Crossing your body. That means like your left elbow goes to your right knee and your right elbow goes to your left knee and you're crossing your body makes both sides of your brain work. And crawling is another one because you would bring your right arm, left arm, right arm, left arm. It's the same as throwing something. So it blew my mind. We had these aides come in to our class with us sometimes. Usually it's because a little kid uses the bathroom or they might throw up and you need some extra hands because they're 5 and you're one person, there's 20 of them. And it was so funny to watch the aide who sometimes is 60 years old and they never knew how to throw correctly, so they're stepping with their right foot and throwing with their right hand, and really you're supposed to throw opposite with opposition, and that's what I mean by crossing the midline. Is all of those things, you're going to be so much more accurate if you're crossing the midline. So elbow to knee, crossing the midline, left to right. Some other stations I do, I'll go ahead and talk about my stations because I have them written down on here because I wanted to make
Yep.
sure I didn't miss any of them. I have my kids balance a lot on balance beams or lava rocks. Also, it's so important for 5 year olds to step over blocks. Like they step over and under. They need to learn over, under a lot. Throwing scarves in the air and catching them with one hand and then the other. Or, as we talked about just a second ago, crossing the midline, throw it up with your right hand, but catch it with your left hand. Sliding is so important. Push ups are so important. And giving the kids a pose that they can do. So we like to do the butterfly pose where you put your feet together and, wiggle your legs. But I always like to do some sort of rest pose so that it's teaching them to regulate their body because that is so important. So important. So let's go into the rest of my lesson here. So we talked about they walk in with a password. They do their 12 stations where I have them go around the whole gym. The outside of the gym has all the stuff set up that I talked about where they're skipping and crawling and balancing. And it just helps them love to move. They love those stations. And then I go into a fitness focus. It mostly is running, uh, it some kind of game that's fitness focused, and then we will work on the activity for that day depending on what it is, and then after that I do a mindful minute. Whereas we clean up our area and then we go back to our X, and I turn on some really soft, music, and they either lay down on their back or they can do the butterfly or whatever the pose of the day is at that station, the yoga pose. And then we do a push through mantra. And it's a mantra that I used at my old school, 5 through 8, or sorry, 3 through 8. And I kind of kindergartenized it, for a lack of a better word, and made it a little easier. And so I have all the kids say it with me. So I ask them a question and they say, I'm going to push through. And they talk about how they're going to push through things that are hard. And it's my favorite part. And then they leave and get them a drink of water.
I love that. I love that. The 12 stations. So from an outsider's perspective, that sounds like a lot. So the 12 stations, is it a lot for them to like remember what to do, remember all of the different movements. So is it the same 12 stations, or do they all have a kind of a theme and it's tied around that theme? Like, is there a yoga station that there's some sort of pose and it's not the same pose the whole year? How do you kind of structure that so they are successful at each station?
So I use a curriculum called Minds in Motion, and it is created by her name's Candice too, the lady that created it. I forget what her last name is, but they actually have in this book. I don't have it with me or anything, but the way that you can stagger the stations. But it was more for like second through fifth grade, so I kindergartenized it as well, and so I teach the kids all 12 stations the very first day of school because and you're honestly you're just going in a circle. They call it the mindful maze in the Minds in Motion thing, but like I say, I just kind of kindergartenized it and did things. Some of the things are way too hard for kindergarten to do, even though I have very high expectations. A kindergartner cannot kick a soccer ball without falling flat on their face the first little bit of school. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I'm not going to have them kick a soccer ball the very first day in a station, right? So do I change the stations? Yes. But probably not until after like 3 months. And then 3 months, I'll just add something. So, for example, the scarves. At first, they're just throwing it and catching it because that's literally all they're expected to do right now. But then 3 months later, I may throw in another scarf or have them throw it with their right, catch with their left. And I have pictures and a number. And so most kindergartners, by that after the first month, they at least know 1 through 10. So they know they start at such and such station with such and such partner. I try to partner them up with someone who they can be successful with. And basically, I walk around and make sure they're doing the stations, but there's pictures there on the back of the card that either I like put a cartoon of a kid like throwing a scarf in the air or a kid skipping or a kid balancing, and so they can see that. But they do like it sounds like it could not happen. Like it sounds
Right.
so difficult, but it's 20 seconds at each station, and I have like an interval timer on my phone, and I just hit start. And it takes 4 minutes of my 30 minutes. And it's just 20 seconds, 20 seconds, 20 seconds. And they just go in that circle. And honestly, after the first week, they got it. The first week is a little stressful, I'm not going to lie. But honestly, after that first week, like they know what they got to do. They know the expectation. They know their job, and they want to be safe and they want to do it quick and they want to make me proud and make their partner proud. And they just do a great job.
So are you seeing these kids multiple days a week?
So I see them, I see a group Monday, Wednesday, and every other Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, and every other
Okay.
Friday. So it's about 3 times a week,
Right.
just depending. So,
Yep. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's the repetitive nature of it when you do stations, even when you're a fourth grade teacher doing reading stations the first couple times it's tough, but then as you get through it, the kids pick up the routines and the expectations, and it becomes a lot easier, and the kids manage themselves. Is there anything that you find yourself doing to kind of ensure their success during those rotations, whether it be manage behavior, direct them in the direction to go, or what are those things that you feel you're doing to really ensure that success?
Well, I will say I don't use the timer until like the second week. So basically, I will say switch. And a cue that I use in my classroom is I'll say freeze, hands on your knees. So whatever they're doing, we will freeze and put our hands on our knees. And then I'll say point to where you go next. And they'll point to where they go next. And that will help them with that. And so after like 2 weeks, then I turn on the timer. So we probably spend a minute on each. Like I told you, I literally teach them this the first day. So if we do a minute a station, that's 12 minutes right there. And so that's most of your class. So the first few days, I mean, that's basically what we work on. And then it only takes that 4 minutes. And just like you said in reading groups or math groups, anything, once the kids can manage themselves, you can throw so many more challenging things at them. And the expectation is you know what station to go to next. You got this, and it just works so much better. So.
Yeah,
I just
no,
love the station.
yeah, I love that idea of not using the timer and basing it on when they're ready. Because when I work with teachers in, academic classrooms that are doing stations, or they're trying that for the first time, usually the goal in that sense is my kids are rotating through activities so I can meet with a small group. And I tell the teachers the first couple times, you shouldn't have a small group. You should have only independent activities so you can get comfortable with, and the students get used to managing their behaviors, knowing how to work through these independent tasks. And then once you feel good about that, then when you're meeting with your small group, you're not going to worry about all that other stuff. You can focus on those kids that you're looking to work with, because that's the real key ingredient, is you're not constantly distracted by everybody else when you're working with that small group. So I love that. I love that idea with the timer. I have
And you have to make it a desired activity too. I feel like if they're not enjoying it, that's when the behaviors are going to happen, right? So I mean, it's so funny. Like when my principal comes in to observe me, or even if people from central office come, they always say like, "No kid is off task," and I'm like, because I literally keep them occupied from the time they walk in that room till the time they leave. Because if I don't, it's going to be a zoo in there, right? And that's not what I want. I want these kids to be enjoying movement and not worried about being unsafe. So that's how I keep it safe, really, for sure.
Yeah, I love your point about it's got to be interesting to them, because that's what's going to hold their attention. So, uh, this idea of movement, you're obviously very passionate about it, and how it impacts their entire life. Have you been able to collaborate with classroom teachers or other subjects in bringing more movement into the way that they're teaching their reading lesson, their science lesson, or any of those other components?
Absolutely. So every year at the very beginning of the school year, I introduce Go Noodle to the teachers, because Go Noodle is just like, honestly, for a lack of a better word, it's an easy way to just click play, and the teacher can finish grading this over here or working with this kid over here, because it grabs the kiddo's attention so quickly, right? And I'm an open national trainer. I don't know if I talked about that on here yet, but Open is a free curriculum that's offered by U.S. Games, and I actually print out the Open curriculum for the teachers. There's an active classroom one, and I give them to the teacher, and then we do like three of the activities in the faculty meeting. That way, they can at least have three things that they can, pull out of their pocket and say, "I'm going to use this today," right? And so I work with them in that sense. And also, indoor recess is like the scariest thing for a kindergarten classroom teacher. They hate it so much. So I always try to like give them ideas of websites they can go to. Lots of YouTube videos ever since COVID hit. I mean, there's a lot of good quality stuff out there, and I share with them, a few cool things from that. And then our teachers just do a really good job. Like, they will collaborate with me. They always come up to me and ask me ideas and stuff. I can't really pull anything out of my mind right now, but borrow scarves, or borrow a balance beam to talk about balance that day, or whatever it is. But our teachers are just so good at my school, at the Kindergarten Academy. My principal does a great job of hiring teachers that love movement and love 5 year olds. And if you love a 5 year old, there's movement. That's just the way they learn, right? So we just talked about kinesthetic learning for sure. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you're signing up for the gig of working in a kindergarten only school, you have to have that mindset, and you have to realize that. I mean, even I was doing a little activity with my son, and we were drawing. We have a little craft table that we do some of the stuff at, and he just said, "Dad, do you care if I stand while I work?" I'm like, no, like, absolutely. Just, but that little thing of like just them being comfortable to feel successful is so important. I was, as a classroom teacher, flexible seating and that type of arrangement was super important in my classroom. And um, it gives another layer of challenge for the teacher to manage. But when you put the students in charge and you give them that freedom, I mean, the positions I would see my kids work in were pretty ridiculous, but if they were working, they were working. If they're comfortable, they're comfortable. And even just, I would teach my kids about, just blood circulation. And when we would get prepared for like state testing, like they when it came to that, they had to sit in a traditional style seat and take a test for a couple hours. But they knew the idea of like when you stand up and stretch, you're getting the blood out of your butt. And I would joke with them, when you sit for 2 hours, where's the blood in your body? They wouldn't really know it. I would say it's in your butt and in your feet. And last time I checked, your butt isn't helping you take this test and think on the work that you're doing. And so I would teach them, just stand up and stretch for 20 seconds, just touch your toes, just to get that blood circulating in your body. So it's that
It's vital
yeah, yep, that
for
kinesthetic
sure.
movement is so important, and it's just, frankly, it's just not talked about enough. It's so important for these kids. So the thing I noticed when I taught when I worked with different ages elementary, I see it in secondary too, but I think the growth in elementary kids from the beginning of the year to the end of the year is, especially in certain grades, is, I felt like second grade was always a big one. They're coming in as first graders and they leave as third graders. So you're starting the year with pre-K, and then you're ending the year with first graders. So just talk about that growth you see, or like the how much you love that growth. Just talk about that first day to that last day that you see with your kids.
Absolutely. I would say that it is the most rewarding part. And I'm not a crier at all, but like I really like not very emotional at all. That's just not my style. And the very first year I taught at the kindergarten academy, I had to do these RTI groups, and I would go in. Well, I got the opportunity to do these RTI groups, and I would go in and pull into a classroom just for about 20 minutes, and I would work with kids on their sight words or the letters or the sounds, et cetera, et cetera. And I had this little girl, and she was the sweetest little thing. She didn't even have any teeth at all. Like she couldn't barely talk because she didn't have no teeth. And at the beginning of the year, she didn't know A from Z. And I mean, I literally didn't even know X. Like that's why I use X's at the kindergarten level for them to sit on, because it's literally the only letter they know, some of them, when they come in, but they at least know X. This little girl didn't even know X. And at Christmas time, her teacher said, "This little girl has a present for you." And I was like, "Oh no, she's made me something, whatever." She comes up to me with this book, and it's a level A book, which means, it's still pretty low, but nonetheless, she had made great bounds of success. And she read that whole book to me. And she said, "Thank you, Coach Young." And she gave me a hug. And I went back to my office and I boohoo cried like a baby, because like I seen that growth just in reading. Um, but in PE, it's even more touching to me, because PE is my life and movement is my life. It's not necessarily seeing their fitness grow, which is so vital and so important, and I definitely see that. But it's just like the light bulb coming on when they can throw a ball from one hand to the other and catch it, or when they realize that if I just listen to Coach Young, I'm going to be able to do this. And jumping rope is one of the biggest ones for kindergarten for me. And some of the teachers that teach first grade, they say, "Oh, I know she came from MKA because he or she knows how to jump rope." And it's because I really work on that skill a lot. And finally, when they can get it over and they jump over with those 2 feet, and you just see that light bulb come on, it just makes your heart it's just amazing. And the growth that you see, and when they graduate, because we do this little graduation at the end, they walk across the stage, and you're just like, that baby has grown in so many ways: socially, emotionally, physically, academically, all of those things in one. And they're going to be the best kiddo that they can be, the best first grader they can be, because I helped them. I aided them in that. So,
I love that.
for sure.
It's the best part of teaching. It's just
It is.
can't replace it. You can't. It's it's funny, I'll have people in the district ask me, now that I'm a coach and I'm out of the classroom, or even some of my kids that I get to see, and they say, "What do you like better?" And I love the job I'm in right now. I think I'm doing a lot. I think I'm in a position where I can help a lot of people. But if you said to me right now, you have to pick coach or teacher for the rest of your career, it's going to be teacher, hands down, because there's no better feeling than having that class of kids that you get to guide, navigate, lead, help them learn and grow. There's nothing better than that. So with our a little bit of time that we have left here, we sometimes will do a segment of our show called a lesson lens, where we dive into a specific lesson that you teach. You took us through your classroom, or I'm sorry, the way you structure your class, but that 20-minute bulk where you do different activities or different movements or different skills. Is there something that we could maybe jump into a little bit of detail on those? Do you have something that's coming to mind for
Yeah,
you?
I could pull something out. Yeah,
Okay.
I could tell you a few. Well, I could tell you one lesson that I really like to teach. So
Okay.
we'll do it.
All right.
Does that sound
So
good?
a few of the questions I don't need to ask single, especially grade level, because we know that. So I'll jump into our third question here. So what are the objectives of this particular part of the lesson?
Okay, so the objectives of the game or the activity would be to be able to manage yourself, manage others, and control your body.
Okay. Perfect. So what are the students actively doing in this game to bring those objectives out?
Right. So in this game activity, I have these little cute bean bags, and they are fruits and vegetables. And I usually teach this around Christmas time because the Grinch is a big thing at that point. And in the Grinch, and if you're listening, in the Grinch, his heart grows to be 10 times the size, because he learns that giving is more important than receiving. And so I teach my kindergartners. They each get a beanbag to start off with, and they have a hula hoop. So they're standing inside their hula hoop with their beanbag. And then I say, ready, go. And when I say go, they can go to other people's hula hoop and take their beanbag, okay? And so when I say freeze, hands on your knees, we all look and see how many beanbags that each kid has. And I do different locomotor skills. So at first they might have to skip, or they might have to leap, or they might have to run, different for each time we do this. So like the first 3 times I let them take from others. And then the last part of the lesson, I'm like, okay, now you're going to go give other people these bean bags of healthy fruits and vegetables. And it teaches them, it is so much better to give and receive. And we talk about awareness of other people and how we're not going to get mad if somebody takes from us, and how giving is so vital and important. But they're also getting lots of movement in, and the healthiness is also thrown in there as well with the fruits and the vegetables. So it's one of my favorites to teach.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. What While the kids are doing these different movements, what are you doing to ensure their success?
I would say that I always know those kids that are going to get upset and that haven't really learned to manage their emotions on the inside. And whereas someone's going to take their beanbag from their hula hoop, and I always try to proximity wise stand close to that kid and make sure that I can cut that off before it happens. And then also, it's just such a great teaching moment to be right there when that kid, takes the beanbag, or in the point of the kid gives the beanbag to the other kid's hoop. And even sometimes, like in a lesson, and this is when this is the best part of the lesson overall. If you have kids taking these beanbags and they're skipping and they're jumping and they're hopping and they're doing all this, but then another kid sees this other kid is upset and gives them that beanbag so they won't be upset, even though the object of this game is to get as many beanbags as you can, right? But then you have those kids that can really handle their social emotional side and can help others. So it's just that light bulb that comes on, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. What's anything that you've done to improve the lesson, or something that you think you need to do the next time you run it just to make it a little bit more successful? Or how did you kind of bring those moments out the more that you've done it?
I would say add more bean bags so that they're not just grabbing one and go to the other. Um Space the hula hoops out, because lots of times I just have them be on the X, but we could use the whole gym, and you can put your hula hoop wherever you want it, and that makes them run more, be more active, and just usually I just let uh, failure and success both happen in my gym, and then I just kind of cut it off where I need to, and we talk about it, and it brings out the best in the kiddos. It really does.
When you do activities where you're giving them that designated hula hoop or some for this game or for others, and you have it set up, do you ever stop in the middle of the game when you know you still have more time and say, okay, you have 10 seconds to place your hula hoop wherever you want because you think it'll help you be more successful in the game?
Um, I will say I played this game with. I taught at a K through 5 school, like my first 4 years. Mentioned a while back. With my older kids, I did that. But sometimes 5 year olds, they're not strategically, their minds are
Yeah.
not strategically thinking, oh, I'm going to go over here because they're just wanting to be close to their friend or, whatever. Like, so I honestly say maybe I could try that next time. And I think I really will. And I may just stop us all and say, okay, you have 10 seconds to go put your hula hoop wherever. But I just never thought of doing it with kindergarten because I don't really think they're strategically minded. But I need to teach myself this lesson and higher expectations. So I'm
Hmm.
gonna try it next time.
Yeah.
Next Christmas, I'll let you know
All right.
how
Perfect.
it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. Let me know on Twitter if that, and how that works out. I'd
I
just be
will.
curious because I agree with you. I don't think many of them or any of them would be strategic, but maybe there's one or two in there, or even just to see what their perspective is and why they choose a space. Is it just completely random or is it social? Or yeah, I'd be curious to see that.
Me too. I really wonder now.
So, our last segment, we ask the same four questions to every guest every week called our exit ticket. So, we're going to wrap things up with that now. So, question number one: what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
The best thing a kid can, or a teacher can do for their kids to make that experience better is to love them and care for them and let them know that they're there for them no matter what and that they can do anything they put their mind to and to truly mean it.
I love that. And it doesn't matter whether you teach kindergarten or 12th grade. It's the same. You might deliver it a little bit different. Your personality, you have to be comfortable with the way you interact with kids, but you have to genuinely believe that, and I completely agree. So, what is the best advice you've ever received, whether it be from a colleague, a supervisor, or even a student?
I would say I was leaving the school that I taught at my first 4 years, and I had a kid come up to me and say, Coach Young, always be you. And I've always tried to be real and be myself and just be 100% with the kid. You know how the kids, they say, be 100. They love to say that. And I think that, like, I always want to just be myself and be real with the kids and be real with the parents and just be honest and be myself and let Jesus show through me and love show through me to each and every person. And I had a kid tell me that one time, just be you, Coach Young. And so that's what I'm doing.
That's awesome. So the school year goes in waves, and there are days and weeks where we struggle to survive because it's conferences, report cards, or different times where things just seem to pile up on us teachers. So in those moments, what is something you would want every educator to hear to power up through that moment of struggle?
I would say that I do this push through mantra with my kids. And as an adult, I do it to myself. So, example, like report cards are due, I'll get on the announcer thing to the whole school. And the kids aren't there yet, it's 7:20. And I'm like, what if it's too hard? And the teachers are like, I'm going to push through. And what if it's too rough? I'm going to push through. And the kids, I have them say, what if you're too young? And the kids say, that's not true. So with the teachers, we say, what if you're too old? And they'll say, that's not true. Just being funny. But in all seriousness, like I say this push through mantra to myself all the time, and I would give that advice to anybody. You can truly do anything you put your mind to. And when I ran the New York City Marathon a while back, and I thought, man, these last few miles are just brutal. My feet hurt and I'm dying. And I thought about those 5 year olds, and I'm like, but they do anything that they put their mind to, and so can Coach Young. So for sure.
That's awesome. The mindset you give yourself is so important, and just like I love that you're doing that mantra with the kids because just teaching them just to say that to themselves. I heard on a podcast um, a while back, and the host said, instead of starting every day, starting your car to go to work, and the day that your car doesn't start, instead of thinking to yourself, I can't believe my car didn't start today, why don't you think to yourself every other day, I can't believe my car started today? Being being happy that it's, your day is starting that way. Just that the way you talk to yourself, that inner monologue is so important. And I love that you're teaching that to these 5-year-olds. So the last question, it's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What do you think separates teachers who are constantly seeking ways to change, update, and innovate their classroom and their teaching strategies?
I would say that that every year I am always looking to be that better teacher, and I feel like teachers like myself and Kyle Bragg and Daniel Hill and I mean LaDonda Porter. These are just people's names I'm pulling from the sky. Like these teachers are out on Twitter and out on Facebook and looking for so many more bright ideas and pulling from their colleagues and asking their kids like, what do you want to learn about? What would you be passionate about learning about? If we don't keep things fresh, we're going to get stuck in that old way of doing things, and we need to keep improvising, and it's going to be best for our kids and best for us. Like if I teach the same lesson 8 times a day and I do that right, and it gets repetitive. Well, with 5-year-olds, it's different every single time. Let me just be honest. But when I taught middle school, I will say, like, I taught those 6 periods a day, and it got tough teaching the same thing over and over again on the same day because it was basically the same thing would happen every time. But I feel like if we just bring in new, fresh stuff, we're going to be more passionate, which is in turn going to bring out the best in the kids for sure. So.
I completely agree with that. So last one's easy. Tell our audience, this has been a fantastic conversation. Tell our audience, how can we follow you? How can we connect with you and stay in touch?
Awesome. All right. So the way that you can follow me is on Twitter, and it's at Candace Young 37. And then my name on Twitter is just Coach Young. That way, like if my parents or my kids end up getting older and they follow me, it'll just be Coach Young. And then Facebook, it's just Candace Young. And I have a YouTube channel where I do a bunch of kindergarten stuff, so you can look that up through Candace Young as well. And anytime anybody on here needs some kindergarten advice, whenever I travel around the United States for Open and I do trainings, being an Open national trainer, everybody's always like, kindergarten scares me to death. And I try to always give advice for my people that are struggling with kindergarten or need some nice, new, fresh ideas. I try to help y'all out. And if you do contact me, I need some help too. We always want to get better. So I may be asking you for some help as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you so much. We will link to all of that on our show notes page, which can be found at poweredup.com/show 64. And we'll have all that link there. If you are listening for the first time, please hit subscribe, share this with another teacher. This has been an unbelievable conversation, and I'm just fortunate enough to be able to have conversations like this on a weekly basis and learn from amazing teachers like yourself, Candice. Candice, I got to say, I'm very jealous that in a couple of years, my own children won't be able to go through your gym classroom, because you clearly are making a huge difference in the lives of these young kiddos and your school as a whole. So just keep doing what you're doing, because what you're doing is amazing, and it's definitely setting them up for success for years to come. So thank you so much. So we'll shut down shop here. Thanks again for your time today, Candice. You absolutely have left us feeling powered up as we power down this episode.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Go be excellent to each other, y'all.
Thank you.